Hey everybody, this is Ian. I'm the head pro at EssentialTennis.com, where it's our mission to bring passionate instruction to passionate tennis players just like you. Thank you for joining me on this interview where I have a special guest with us, Mr. Bob Litwin. Bob, how you doing? Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for being here. This is great.
So, Bob and I are going to be discussing a whole host of different topics that more or less are connected to the general broad topic of mental toughness, peak performance. Basically, how can we play at our best when it really matters the most? Does that sum it up pretty well, Bob?
Sure, absolutely.
So just to give a little bit of background on Bob. Bob is an incredible competitor. He's won 18 gold balls. That's 18 national championships. He's been on the U.S. Senior Davis Cup team 8 different times, and he's also held a #1 ITF world ranking, and he's won the ITF Senior World Championships. Now, Bob, in doing a little bit of research on you before we actually sat down to have this discussion, I did a little bit of digging, and I read that you actually didn't compete after high school until age 32. It wasn't until age 32 that you got into competition again. Is that correct? And if so, how was it that you were able to get to such a high level of competition after taking that long break?
Well, it was kind of interesting. I went to Michigan. I wasn't good enough to play there. They were an amazing team. And I had played high school tennis. I was a basketball player playing tennis, basically, in the off season. But I didn't really compete very much. And when I was in college, I didn't play. And then after college, I was teaching school and then somehow ended up being the tennis coach because I had played high school tennis. They picked me to be the coach of a team that didn't really exist. I was teaching tennis and, to a basic, the recreational players on Long Island. And I was always saying things to them that made a lot of sense to me, like, oh, when you're down, break point, go for the return. And they would say, like, you don't understand. It's not that easy. I said, what's so hard about it? So I just kind of felt like, well, I'm going to just play a tournament or two and just kind of not show them, but figure out what this is about. And I went into a tournament, maybe I was 28, and I played an Eastern tournament. And I lost to somebody who was like, I say they were terrible, but they weren't better than me. But they weren't better than me, but they won more points than I did. They won the match, and I was like embarrassed, humiliated. And I thought, this is tricky. And, I can already play decent tennis, but I got to figure this out. So what happened was I started to use these tools that I had spent a lot of time developing for other people. Because I had no background in teaching tennis, I didn't really know what to tell people. So basically my system was, if you were playing with me and you hit a good shot, I would say, oh, that was good. What'd you do? And then the person would say, oh, well, I don't know. I'm just so frustrated. I didn't care. So I just swung. I said, like, all right, let's work on that. Just swing, not caring. And then I turned that into accepting or whatever. So I went out there and I realized that for myself, it wasn't a matter of whether I could play tennis well. I could do that already. I had decent strokes. I never missed in a lesson with a student. So I could do that, given adjusting to speed of the shot. And I thought what's missing is like this noise going on in my head is just the wrong noise. Worried, fear, can't do it. How could I have missed that? All this stuff. And I just started to like one by one train those pieces out as I was trying to play tennis. And when I was 33, I tried out for the Maccabean team. I figured, good move. I'll eliminate 98% of all players because it's the all-Jewish Olympics. I figured 2%, I've got a chance. And I tried out. I won the regionals, and I went to Philly to play the nationals, and I did okay. Actually, I lost my first round love to a young guy from Harvard because I was in the open division. But that year, Brad Gilbert made the team. That was the first time I met Brad Gilbert. And although I didn't play with him, I watched him and thought like, yeah, well, he's great. He's great college player, but he doesn't look that different than me. And I thought, so I didn't qualify, but I determined for myself, I'm going to make this team in 4 years because it's every 4 years. And I started to play more tournaments, did pretty well in Eastern tournaments, but then went to nationals, 35 nationals, crushed. Couldn't win a match for, I did okay in the Maccabeans. I made it when I was 36 or 37, but I couldn't win a match in a tournament national. And I just kept working out this noise that was going on. I got kind to myself. I congratulated myself, things that were kind of new, sort of mental training was kind of starting around that time. Jim Lair, Tim Galway was in the, early 80s.
Sure.
And there I was starting to win more matches than I used to against people that were about the same as me. Now I was winning matches that were like occasionally against people that were better than me. And I just started to shift, and I got very strong mentally. My game never really changed that much, but who I was on the court changed dramatically. And then when I was 40, when I was 39, I broke through, made it to the semis of the national grass, which was to my advantage, the grass. I'm a lefty. I'm a very good athlete. I felt comfortable on the grass. I ended up losing to Freddie McNair, who was a French Open doubles champion. And he was beating me up. And I climbed back into the match. And I was close in the first set. Then it started to rain. He packed up the bags, left, came back the next day. We played on the hard courts, done. But the next year I won it. I won that tournament. And 6 months later, I went to California to play in the 40 national grass. I was thrilled. They seeded me number 2 based on the year before. As far as I was concerned, being seeded 2 was enough. I didn't even want to play. Just getting the acknowledgement was cool. And I told the tournament director, this guy, Frank Zerby, this old guy, I said, thank you for seeding me number 2. And he said, look, we had to seed you 2 because of your 35 win. But frankly, there's 8 guys in the tournament that we think are better than you. And then I won it. And I had big wins. I had really big wins in that tournament. And then I just started to feel comfortable with who I was. But I kept working on my mental game and climbed the ladder.
So a couple interesting comments that I think you made. One was a sentiment that I hear frequently from our viewers and our fans that write into us with questions about how they can get better at tennis. Something that I hear pretty often is the problem or the issue. Somebody will come to me. The way that they phrase it is basically the same way that you did, which was, hey, I keep losing to this guy or this girl who's not as good as me. And that always kind of strikes me as kind of a funny comment. Like, I keep losing to this player, but somehow I still perceive them as being not as good as me. What do you think it is about tennis players' psyche, and where is that disconnect for us, where we don't really, our perception is maybe not really in line with reality? Where do you think that comes from?
I'm not sure it's that. I think that it's that, like, in all the years I was teaching tennis, which I did for like 35 years, the message that I picked up on was people were coming in and saying, I'm not playing the way I can play. Mm-hmm. That when I'm out here hitting with you, or when I'm just in a drill, or I'm just practicing, I do play better. But then when I go into competition, I don't play as I can play. And I was confused as a teacher. I always thought people wanted to become great. And they were saying that too. They wanted to be like Djokovic or Borg or whatever. But really what they were saying is, I want to play the way I can play. And
sure.
To me, so I think that the distortion for people is that they think they ought to be able to play the way they're able to play in a safe, comfortable environment, in a situation that's not safe, not comfortable, where there's all kinds of other things going on. So, and an interesting side thing is, there's a guy who was a tour player, Eric Van Dillen, same age as Stan Smith and those guys, who started something. He was in the 19th hole, the bar after playing golf, and there were guys sitting around watching Tiger and Phil Mickelson and these guys, and they're all saying like, oh, how can he miss that 3-foot putt? And Van Dillen was like, hey, let me put you in a situation where you've got 10 million people watching you, and you're playing for a lot of money, and you got people there in person that are like making noise and everything. You'd know that there's a difference when it counts. And I think that people don't realize that they know it's different because of their results, but they think it won't be different. So my thing with people is, how can you play the way you can play? How can you get there? And then eventually from there you can get better.
So in describing your own journey, trying to figure this out, several times you used the word noise, and you weren't. I don't think you were talking about literal noise, but it sounded like mental noise, other things going on in your head that were distracting you.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that? What was that noise, and how is it that you were able to figure out how to subdue that, or maybe you didn't subdue it and you were able to just perform well in spite of it? Which was it?
Oh, no. I had to change the noise. I had to change the voice. So my voice, the most basic voice was like, how could you miss that shot? And I never.
I'm very familiar with that voice.
Yeah. I think most of us are, and I think it's a common thing. But what I learned was like, well, let me answer that question, which I never did. When I would hear that noise, I would never try to answer that question. The answer was, well, you're judging yourself, or you're not that experienced, or you're paying attention to the wrong thing. The answers were pretty clear. How can you miss that shot? Rather than leaving it as this just kind of self-critical comment. So what I started to get in touch was with the idea of how I could flip this kind of story that I was telling myself, which was, it wasn't untrue. I was missing a shot that I probably shouldn't have missed. It was below my level, or it was an easy shot, or it was a big moment, and I didn't realize that that's a factor. So I started to flip stories. And what I did was I took a phrase like, how can you miss that shot? And I changed it to like, I'm accepting of the fact that I cannot be perfect. So when I would miss a shot, instead of that negative voice or the critical voice, whatever you want to call it, I had a different voice that was actually, it was like kind of making it okay. It wasn't like, oh, you missed, it doesn't matter. But it was like, hey, I saw all kinds of great players missing shots. And I'm over here saying, how can I miss that shot? They're not saying that. I mean, some were, but the best weren't. They were just like taking it, accepting it. So, all of the negative shots, like, oh, you're so terrible. I would change that. Afterwards, I would write about my experience. That was a big thing, that I was always writing a little paragraph or 2 paragraphs about a match I played. And those things that I would remember that I said to myself that weren't working, I flipped into things that could work. So, oh, I'm so terrible I would change that to like, I'm developing as a player. And that voice, it was a battle to use that voice while I was playing, but I was aware that I had a second voice that was quieter. It wasn't my default voice, but it was my angel rather than my judge. My judge had a loud voice. It had a lot of work, good work it put in. It was very solid. It never really needed to work that hard because I practiced that bad voice so much. So what I did was I kind of even welcomed the battle between the two voices, and I would laugh in the match when I would hear myself going with the judge versus the angel. But I would constantly come up with methods. There was another where I would say, like, I have this book coming out where one of the chapters is called Bring Your Angels, Not Your Judges. I realized that I had up on the fence these like 5 judges in black robes that were up there saying, you're no good. How could you do this? You shouldn't even be playing. Go back to what you were doing.
Sure.
So one day I saw like, well, if I've got those on one fence, let me bring on the other fence like 5 angels, the perfect coach, the perfect parent who's saying like, hey, you're doing great. Keep going. Keep trying. You're making great effort. And even though, both of the voices were fabrications, they were both stories. So that was, the basis for what I ended up becoming, which was a storytelling coach. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So it sounds to me like you're saying that your whole approach, and Bob now has transitioned. He's not only coaching tennis players and other athletes, but you're also now working with business people, doctors, lawyers, hedge fund managers. Have you found that the judge voice or the judge stories are pretty similar and universal from discipline to discipline?
For sure. I think, look, there are people that are just solid, but most of us aren't. And most of us have some times that we're just, for lack of a better word, we're self-critical, or we're too emotional, or we're too impatient, or we're just not kind to ourselves, have too much expectation based on like maybe past success rather than what's going on right now. I mean, in the hedge fund world, it's very similar to tennis because, these people, they invest dollars for investors and they get it wrong. The good ones get it wrong about 47% of the time. In every day, they're right a little bit more than half the time. And, in tennis, it's more like about what? 70% of the errors points are lost on errors. So on a good day, you're making 3 or 4 errors out of 10, maybe. So these guys, as soon as they make a bad play, if they don't pull it together, then they make another bad play, or they're likely to.
Sure.
Just like a tennis player. So for them, their bad play is like, oh, how could you have missed that particular investment? Or, oh, you should have put on more or less, or you shouldn't have done it. Or, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. I mean, these are thoughts that are very normal that go on all day long for them. And look, I have 5 daughters. 4 of them have kids, right? And I can't believe that I told my grandchild this. It's like, all right, well, that's in that world. People are just highly critical of themselves, and many people think that they're supposed to get it right all the time.
So what I find really kind of refreshing about your approach, I feel like a lot of the way that a lot of people try to tackle these mental issues or these performance issues is they kind of try to fool themselves. They kind of trick themselves into wanting to believe that, pressure isn't really a real thing, you're making it up in your head, or they'll try to trick themselves into literally thinking that the score is different than what it is, or something like that. It sounds like you're very much accepting of the reality of whatever it is going on, but you're just more cognizant of the choice that you have to be critical or be supportive of yourself. Is that accurate? Does that sound about right?
So, Billie Jean's book is called Pressure is a Privilege. That's a story that she's telling that allows her, when she's on the court, to welcome the pressure, even though it's pressure. She calls it something else. When people say it's not pressure, they're not really, it's not that they're lying to themselves, but in a way, they're just not seeing what really is. So for me, as far as the word pressure goes, I see generally, my thing is I see the perceived pressure points, and it's perceived. The perceived pressure points is the sweetest moments in matches. Now, when I first said that to myself, I didn't. But I would write it down. I'd say, oh, yeah, I see. I'd tell people, oh, I see. That's what I believe. I believe the pressure points are the sweetest moments. And in some ways, when matches are over and you've had pressure points or moments and you've done well in them, those are the moments that people say are the sweetest. They don't feel like the sweetest when they're doing them. They don't even want them. I remember there was a kid I was teaching, a really good junior player, who said whenever I'm about to be in a pressure moment, I do terribly. And I end up not in the pressure moment because I will lose that point before I get to the pressure point. So I say to people so how's that working for you? Not very well. So he said, so what about, starting to tell a different story, which is the pressure moments are the sweetest moments in matches. And it's not that you become that right away, but in the same way you practice anything else, forehands, backhands, doing the posture, the Jim Lair's 16-second cure, you practice it. And if you practice it enough, you start to become it. And I think that people don't generally practice the mental stuff very much. 90% of what they do is hitting balls. 8% of what they do, 9% of what they do is in the gym half-heartedly, and maybe less than 1% is the mental training. And maybe that's because you can't see the results of it. But it requires the same amount of practice. And look, Ian, there's not a shortage of mental tips. Everybody's got, you have to be positive. Relax under pressure. Put your shoulders back. I mean, why don't people just do them? Because people don't do things just because they've heard it. They need to practice it. So if you want to practice good posture in between points, you don't practice it when in the middle of a match and expect you're going to do it. You practice it every day, every single point that you play in practice. And then you start to do it without thinking about it. So Maria Sharapova doesn't think, I mean, she's not playing anymore, but she doesn't think about bouncing up on her toes before serving. She practiced that. until it became part of who she was. And the cool thing about all these tips is people can become any of these tips. You can pick any one of them is good. You just have to devote yourself to practicing them with the same devotion, intensity, and commitment that you do these other things. And really, when people get to a certain point, Ian, where their game is good, where they feel, my game is good, I'm just not playing that way, that's just when they should shift over to either the conditioning or the mental side and to put the time into that, because that is what's going to allow them to do it. The physical training guys, they're going to tell us, if you get tired at the end of a match, it doesn't matter how good your technique is, it's going to break down. So, okay, if that happens at the end of a match, stop hitting forehands and backhands and get into some form of conditioning so that doesn't break down. Mental, boy, people break down mentally in the second point of a game, of the match.
True story.
It's not even a fatigue factor. It's just like, I double faulted. Oh my God, what am I going to do?
It's just one of those days, right?
Oh, yeah, it's one of those days. Yeah. But I thought maybe it would be good to share for the people that are going to be watching this, that I had written out for myself a very brief, it was like a tennis mission about like, that I would read before I would go on the court, because this would be what I was going to try to be as a player. So may I read it?
Please. Yeah, absolutely.
You can't say no now that I've brought it up.
I'm all in now. Yeah, let's hear it.
So my mission when I walk on the court is this: to be an extraordinary competitor who plays in competition at the high end of my skill and talent, to love the competition more than I love to win, and to accept whatever the outcome is with dignity and class, to compete in the moment, to avoid past tripping and future tripping, to compete for each point, to compete with effortless effort, to be non-judgmental of myself, to enjoy myself, to be enthusiastic, to be forgiving of myself for my inability to achieve perfection, to see the perceived pressure moments as the sweetest moments, and to have every match be an experience where I grow as a person and as a player. Now, when I go out on the court in a tournament, and that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm 50% successful maybe, there's a good chance I'm going to win, because I'm not making excuses. I'm not like beating myself up. I'm like okay with what's going on. So that reduces a lot of pressure. It's like taking my mind off the target, which is what creates so much pressure, even for me too. I mean, look, I've played a lot of matches in my life now. And when I start, I think it was Andre who said, like, when I think about winning and losing, I lose 50% of the time. When I think about just playing, I win 98% of the time.
I like your, for what, I mean, I guess it's just human nature, right? We're so outcome focused. And I love the part of your ritual statement there where you talked about future tripping and past tripping. I guess that's what being focused on winning or losing is, right? Isn't that just a form of being focused on the future rather than the present moment?
Yes, except I would take issue with using the word focus for that, because I think focus is present. It's thinking about the past and future. I mean, there's probably nobody who's watching or listening to this that hasn't found that when they start thinking about winning, it starts to slip away. Or if it's not even winning, losing, how am I playing is still result oriented. But but how do you get focused? It takes the same kind of devotion and practice. It doesn't just happen. Some people are more focused than others, but it's practice.
So you've obviously at some point you've stumbled across a ratio that works really well for you. You were talking a couple minutes ago about splitting up practice time on the court, hitting balls, time in the gym, working on fitness, and then also time purposefully working on your mental toughness or being able to deal with that noise. So what's the ratio for you? I would suspect, although tell me if I'm wrong, I would suspect that maybe the perfect ratio is a little bit different for different people. But for you, when you're going and you've won an incredible amount of high-level tournaments, what's the best mix for you personally?
Well, I've been doing this a long time, this mental stuff. So at the beginning, I would read a lot about performance, about excellence, in many fields. And I would write not a lot of words, but I would always write about my game to create distance. So that was, to say what percentage of my day that was, it was still smaller than hitting balls because I was teaching tennis. But now when I'm getting ready for a tournament, I play points, I play sets. But what I'm doing is I'm watching what's going on internally while playing. I'm still playing, I'm still keeping score, but my emphasis is on, am I in the right place? Am I, like, a few years ago, I came up with this idea of, like, you know what? I just have to be Bob on the court. That's just gonna have to work, because if I try and be better than Bob, I'm usually worse. And if I'm just okay with myself, which, look, it took a long time for me to get there, to evolve as a person where I feel okay with my own skin on a tennis court, where people are judging you from the outside and watching, and how could you lose to that guy? I can take a loss to anybody now. And a win is nice too, but now, like, I moved to Colorado after being in the East my whole life a year ago. I'm playing at altitude on hard courts after playing at sea level on clay courts my whole life. When I got here, I had to, like, meet people, and I was hitting the ball out by 15 feet. I couldn't find my forehand. My toss was off all the time. The game was different. People were running up to the net after one shot. I never even knew that. Nobody developed points. So people were like, you're so cool about, like, losing. Well, the thing is that I'm kind of, like, enjoying the fact that I have to relearn this game. I know I'll find it. It might take me a few months, but, like, losing to somebody's not going to really take away who I am. So to me, I was welcoming this kind of, like, game of trying to figure it all out, rather than, like, how could you be missing forehands? Well, the answer is obvious. I'm playing at 5,000 feet. How's that for an answer? Does that work? I mean, it's the truth, but that doesn't make me play better. So I really welcome the noise. I welcome it. I like to play with it. It's a game for me. So I would say 100% of the time when I'm playing, I'm doing mental stuff. Doesn't mean that my body's not playing tennis. And, people say to me, these guys out here that I've met, I play with guys that are your age, a little older. I'm 68, and I'm competing with guys that are 45 and 50. And they're like, do you, like, care? I said, yeah, I do. I care. I care about, like, bringing myself to the court. And I like to be able to feel okay with what's going on there. I'm not always happy, but I'm okay with it. And I think that, what I've said to people over the years is, if you can get to a point where you're okay with how it goes, you're going to have some great days. You're going to have some terrible days. The more you feel okay about it, I think the less you're going to have these big ups and big downs, and you'll start to be more the breadth of your game will change. And once that breadth of your game changes, you become like the champions. You don't see much difference from day to day.
Not the most successful ones, anyway. So it sounds to me like you put one or two more questions, Bob. I'm enjoying this conversation very much. It sounds to me like you put a lot of value in being present and aware of what kind of state you're in, or what kind of stories you're telling yourself as you're on the court, which sounds a lot to me like what I hear described from people who advocate meditation. What are your thoughts on meditation as a way to be more in tune with the stories that we're telling ourselves?
I think any form of, like, mindfulness training is something that helps you deepen your skill of focus and improve the skill of letting go of thinking. Because I think that, meditation, mindfulness training, whatever, there are different words and different types.
Sure.
And, imagine when I got to Wall Street and I started telling people to meditate, it was like, are you serious? I'm not going to go to the top of a mountain and wear a sheet. So I've changed the word to things like, brain cleansing or whatever. It doesn't matter what you call it. But I think that it's a great thing to spend time finding presence. And I think a way to do it is to do some form of sitting in silence, or when you're out walking, to feel your feet hitting the ground, or to take the time really to just, notice the trees or smell the roses. actually, this is a good thing about meditation. I'm really connected to Novak, as we've talked about. I mean, I'm not a friend of his, but I know I've met him, and I was told about him that people would be really surprised at how much time he spends in nature. Because when he's in nature, several things happen. One is he sees how small he really is and how what he's doing in the big picture is not that big a deal. So think about how that reduces pressure. That's like amazing. Sure. But the other thing is that's how he deepens his presence. I mean, when he's hitting a tennis ball, he is present, but how does he practice it? He goes for walks in nature. He looks at the stars. And you see, when you look at the stars, you're just looking at the stars. So that's being present. And I thought it was really fascinating to hear, because I'm always thinking like, oh, the guy is just working out, it's training. He does a lot of yoga, which is working on presence. He meditates every day. I think the first hour of his day, he devotes to presence. That's a lot. So I like the idea. I encourage it. It takes a long time to get people to do it because they think it's like weird. Even to this day, even though it's accepting, it's like, sure, it's weird. I'd rather hit more serves. They say that.
So it sounds like you've come across, you've come down a really incredible journey over the last several decades for yourself personally, also the relationships that you have with those that are close to you in life, your relationship to athletics and your tennis, and now business people. And I know that you've been working really hard on taking everything that you've learned and putting it into this new book, which it comes out this month, right? It's May 2016 currently.
May 31st, yeah.
31st, okay. So the title is Live the Best Story of Your Life, A World Champion's Guide to Lasting Change. Oh, there it is. Nice. So how in the world did you go about trying to compile this into book form, all these different findings that you've come across?
Well, first of all, I've been writing tennis journals for 20 years. When I started making these Senior Davis Cup teams, people would say, like, what goes on there? You always tell us, well, you won or you lost. What really happens? So I'd been writing journals, which are much easier because they're a blast for one thing, done, it's out, you don't go back. But I had lost my wife 5 years ago, and after she had passed away, my kids said, it's time to write the book. Everything you've taught us, write the book. And I thought I was going to write about that experience, which was a remarkable experience. I mean, not a good one, but it was remarkable. All the training in tennis really helped a lot in that time. And as I started to write it, the book instead became one of the way in which I faced adversity. And it's not about me, but like facing adversity. And facing adversity sort of is what tennis is about. How do you deal with difficulty? So it's a book that basically it presents the idea, the model of storytelling that can be used for anything. And it's got examples of athletes and business people and people I've worked with over the years. It's a really simple, very, very simple concept. It's fun. But the writing of it is really hard. It took me 5 years. And it was like, it was an amazing experience. And writing is a skill, which, I mean, I was a decent writer, but I was never somebody who could write a book. That's a different skill set. And it required a lot of the tools that I had used as a player, the discipline, the hanging in there, the not quitting on myself. But believe me, in this, there was a lot of judge going on. There was a lot of critic because
I was going to ask, I'm sure.
Oh, it was like brutal. I would be like, quiet, get out of here. I had somebody who was helping me, just an editor who would like help me stay on track. And she would always say to me, like, revel in the noise, enjoy the noise, let it go on, it'll get quiet, and then you can write again. So it was interesting. When I pulled the actual book out of the box a few weeks ago when it arrived, they sent me a bunch of them. I was like, it was an amazing feeling on the one hand, but it felt very similar to the day I became number one in the world. I was really egoing out on it. It was really cool. I was in Perth, Australia. The ITF said, "Hey, you're going to be number one." It's like, it was great, great, great. Like 4 days later, I was back in the United States and people were making a big deal about it. And I was like, yeah, but you know what? I'm not the best player I can be. I had a good year. at a good tournament at the end of the year. I have so much left to do as a player. I'm a better player now than I was then. I mean, age-wise, I don't think I would beat myself of 10 years ago, but I'm a better player in every single way. And after finishing the book, it was like an incredible feeling when I pulled it out. And then I thought, this is just my first book. It's like my first match. If I'm going to, I mean, I think it's good. I mean, people like it, but I've got to do another one, a different one. So it's an amazing, amazing, amazing feeling to complete something. Like completing the run to number one, the journey was amazing. Being number one, it was great. It's cool. It's nice on my resume, but it wasn't as big as like all the stuff along the way. And the book was about the experience of writing it. So it's cool.
It sounds like you very much have embodied the skill or the art of really enjoying the process rather than being focused on the outcome of whatever it is that you're doing.
You know what? I don't think, I mean, we have a choice about that. And a lot of people, and myself as well, choose result thinking a lot, but you really don't experience what's going on that well. And, you know, unfortunately, I had this one experience where, you know, it's like if we were in the future or the past too much, we were losing the present, which was a short present. And, you know, I mean, look, life is long, but life is short. And it's really sweet to like experience life as it is rather than what you want tomorrow. But it's normal stuff. But it's great to like live now, live life.
Well, if you're watching and you'd like to learn more about Bob's book, I know that you can pre-order the book as of right now. This video will probably be out before the 31st. So if you're watching it before the 31st, you can go pre-order right now on Amazon.com, also on BarnesandNoble.com. I assume at probably the retail locations as well. Is that right, Bob?
It'll be in the stores on May 31st, yeah.
Awesome. So definitely go check it out. Also, BobLitwin.com it looks like is your central hub. Any other places where people can connect with you online, Bob?
The website's really a good way to go. My journals are there. There's a lot of material on there. But right now, I mean, being that I'm pushing the book out, there's a Facebook page. Yeah, there's personal pages and sort of fan pages. So I have this new page for the book that's facebook.com/Bob Litwin author.
Okay.
And hey, if people go there, I hope they can like it because that'll get other people to know about it. But I'm not that focused on the result anyhow. I'm like the process of writing. I'm serious. It's like my life is good. I don't need more business. I don't want to work that much more. I like what I've got, but I want people to be able to get the benefit of the book. So that's why I want it out there. Awesome.
Well, we'll put that link in the description down below, along with links to Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. Any final thoughts, Bob, for our audience who's working hard to play their best and hopefully now tell themselves the best stories that they can?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. One is spend a little more time writing about your game than thinking about it. When you write about it, you get some distance on it, and you can look at it as somebody else's story, which we're really good at fixing. It's like, that's one thing. Another thing is invest time in some form of mindfulness training, meditation, whatever it is, even a minute, even just a couple of breaths a day. Big benefit, huge, huge benefit. And the biggest thing, and this is what my life is about, is like learn to flip your stories. Every time there's something's going on that's not really working for you, say to yourself, how's that working for me? Not. Well, flip the story. Even though it's a new fabrication, if you know that your other story is basically a fabrication too, that's when you can pick and choose.
Awesome. Well, Bob, thank you so much for spending time with me and spending time with our followers. Appreciate it very, very much. If you're watching right now and you've enjoyed this, do us a favor and click like and share it, maybe with your teammates or other friends that could find this helpful. And leave us comments down below as well. Bob, maybe you could drop by and answer any questions that people have, possibly?
I will. Just let me know how I do it, and I will.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Bob, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And thank you for sharing your passion and your insights with the world.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much, Ian. I appreciate it. And see you at Tennis Congress.
For hundreds of free digital tennis lessons, head over to essentialtennis.com right now. More wins and more fun on the court is right around the corner. You'll even get a free gift just for stopping by. Simply click the link at the top of any page.